Some men get a phone call at 3 a.m. that ends everything in a single sentence. I got 4 days of dead air, and I want you to understand something before this story goes any further. The not knowing very nearly finished me before either of my sons ever said a word out loud. But here's the part I didn't understand yet, sitting in that garage at midnight with the engine ticking as it cooled. The silence wasn't an accident. It wasn't a dropped phone or a dead battery. Somebody on the other end of those unanswered calls was making a decision about me in real time. And by the time I found out what that decision was, I'd already made a few of my own that I couldn't take back. My name is Walt Osee. I run Frostline Medical Systems out of a business park in Cedar Rapids, refrigeration units that keep blood banks and vaccine stock alive at the temperature between fine and catastrophe. I built it from one service van and a toolbox my own father never lived to see me buy. He was a merchant seaman gone 8 months out of 12. The year I turned 9, his ship didn't come back. No body, a folded flag, a widow's check that ran dry before I hit high school. So when my oldest Marcus was born and Dion 2 years after him, I made myself one promise in that hospital parking lot. And I want you to remember I said promise, because this story is partly about what happens when a promise outlives its usefulness to the people it was made for. These boys will never know that particular kind of empty. I kept it for 26 years. I did not know going in that a promise can calcify into something closer to a leash. I know it now. Welcome to the story. Stay with me, because nobody in it is exactly who they look like at first, including, it turns out, me. It started with an email so dull I nearly archived it. Action required. Guarantor verification. Unit 1407. Marcus's building, out in the domain in Austin. Glass tower, rooftop pool, doorman who calls you sir whether you've earned it. I'd co-signed the lease 2 years earlier when Marcus landed his first job out of grad school. My name behind his credit. My signature, holding up a life I never once saw firsthand. Renewal was due in 6 days. I needed 30 seconds from Marcus to clear a line item, and I called him from the shop floor, half watching a technician recalibrate a blood bank compressor through the glass. Voicemail. Fine, probably in a meeting. Nothing the next evening. Voicemail again. I called Dion, expecting he'd at least know if his brother had dropped his phone in a lake. Voicemail. Both sons, same week, and here's where I want to be honest with you about something most fathers won't admit on camera. My first thought wasn't fear. It was hurt. A small, petty, entirely human flicker of their ignoring me before the fear arrived and buried it. My wife, Renata, clocked it at dinner before I said a word. 29 years does that. You've barely touched your plate. They're not picking up, either of them. She waved it off, and she was right to, statistically, in the moment, she was the reasonable one. They're grown, Walt. They're busy. Here's the first thing I didn't know yet, and I want you to file it away because it matters later. Renata had heard from Dion 9 days before any of this. A short text. Nothing alarming on its face. Things are kind of a mess down here, don't worry, Mom. She hadn't mentioned it to me because she'd learned, the way wives of fixers learn, that if she handed me a loose thread, I'd pull until the whole sweater came apart in my hands. She was trying to protect our sons from me, not the other way around. I didn't find that out until much later, and when I did, it rearranged everything I thought I understood about who was hiding what from whom. Day 3, the deadline 48 hours out. I called Marcus 9 times, Dion 6. Every call died in a voicemail box. I stopped eating properly. Every time I closed my eyes, I saw wreckage on I-35. 2 highway patrolmen on my porch with their hats already in their hands. 1 in the morning, Renata sat up behind me. Something's wrong, I said. 4 days, that's not normal. Maybe both phones died. For 4 straight days? I watched that same cold drop hit her face, and I didn't know then that it wasn't only fear for the boys sitting behind her eyes. It was guilt. She was doing the math on that 9-day-old text message and deciding right there not to tell me about it yet. Pack a bag, I said. We're flying down. She didn't argue. She packed a bag, and she kept a secret, and both of those things came from the exact same place in her, trying to keep this family from detonating one day sooner than it had to. We landed in Austin a little after 1, heat coming up off the tarmac like something with weight to it. I rented a Tahoe, pointed us toward the domain. Renata kept repeating the same sentence like a charm against bad news. There's probably some boring explanation. Then why won't they answer in 4 days? She went quiet. I think some part of her already suspected the explanation waiting for us wasn't boring at all. It was worse than either of us had let ourselves imagine, just not in the direction we'd feared. We rode the elevator to 14 in silence. My hand actually shook lifting it to knock. Then I heard music. Laughter. Easy. Celebratory. Balloons on the doorframe. For 1/2 second, relief hit me so hard my knees nearly buckled. Thank God they're alive. I knocked. The door opened on Marcus, drink in hand, a grin that curdled the instant he registered who was standing there. What are you guys doing here? Not Dad. Not is everything okay? Renata pushed past me, hand flying to her mouth. Oh, thank God, we've been so worried, we thought... Marcus cut her off. And here is where I need you to watch closely because this is the first place the story stops being simple. He didn't just deliver an insult. He delivered a rehearsed one. I'd know that cadence anywhere. I'd heard it in his voice as a teenager reciting a class presentation he'd practiced in the mirror. Somebody had helped him get to stay on your own. Somebody, or something, had primed that sentence long before I ever knocked on that door. We didn't answer because we didn't want to talk to you, he said. Stop calling us. You're suffocating us. Stay on your own. 4 words that landed harder than anything I've survived, including my own father's 45-year-long absence. And behind Marcus, a young woman stepped up, poised, a glass of something pink in hand. Honestly, she said, do you two ever stop hovering? Renata blinked at her. I'm sorry. Who are you? She raised her left hand, slow, deliberate. A ring caught the light. I'm Presley, his fiancé, and today is our engagement party, which you're currently ruining. I want to stop the story right here and tell you something about Presley that I did not know standing in that hallway, and that changes how you should hear every line she says from this point forward. Presley was not simply cruel for sport. Presley's own father had walked out on her family when she was 11 and had spent the following 15 years reappearing exactly when it was convenient for him. Birthdays, graduations, big showy gestures, before vanishing again. She had built her entire adult framework around one rule: never let a parent back into a room they haven't earned re-entry into. She looked at Walt Osei, a stranger to her, and she didn't see a terrified father who'd flown 1,000 miles out of love. She saw her own father's ghost wearing a different face, showing up right when it would cost her the most to say no. She was defending herself against a man she'd never met, using a script she'd built for someone else entirely. That doesn't make what she said kind. It makes it explainable. And explainable is so much worse than cartoonish, because it means she'll do it again, to someone else, with the same absolute conviction that she's finally the one protecting herself this time. Renata's face did something in that hallway I had never seen in 29 years, like someone had reached bare-handed into her chest and closed a fist. And I understood, watching her, exactly what she was thinking about, because I was thinking about it too. The ring in our home safe. Her grandmother's ring, smuggled out of Sicily sewn into a coat lining, kept polished for 20 years for a moment that had just happened without her in the room. Dion appeared with a tray of barbecue and groaned at the sight of us. Are you serious right now? But here's the twist I didn't catch until I replayed that afternoon 100 times in my head weeks later. Dion didn't look at Marcus when he said it. He looked at Presley first, checking her face the way you check a room for who's actually in charge of it. And when Marcus launched into the savior complex speech, you think co-signing a piece of paper means you get to track our every move. Dion's jaw tightened in a way that had nothing to do with agreement. He wasn't performing solidarity. He was performing fear of being the one who breaks ranks. I know that now. I didn't know it then. What I heard was 2 sons, unified, telling me they'd chosen silence on purpose. We wanted to see how long it'd take you to get the hint. And what I felt was the floor of 26 years dropping out from under me all at once. What I didn't hear, because nobody said it in that hallway, was the thing Dion told his mother 3 weeks later, alone, in a gas station parking lot outside Waco, sobbing so hard he could barely get the sentence out. I didn't want to do it, Mom. Marcus said if I didn't back him up in front of Presley, he'd tell her I was still asking him for money. I let you and Dad think we were both cruel because I was more scared of my brother than I was of hurting you. That's twist number one, and I want to sit on it for a second, because it changes the entire shape of what happened on that doorstep. It wasn't two villains and two victims. It was one son improvising cruelty to protect a fragile new engagement, one son terrified of losing his only sibling's approval, one fiancé refighting a war from 15 years earlier with the wrong opponent, and one father who had absolutely no way of knowing any of it, standing in a hallway watching what looked for all the world like a unified front. Presley tossed her hair. "We're trying to celebrate with people who actually matter. Please leave." I didn't raise my voice. I took my wife's shaking hand and turned for the elevator. And I want to be honest. Some small, cold part of me, writing down in that mirrored box, had already started drafting the first phone call I'd make in the morning. I didn't know yet that I was about to set something in motion I couldn't fully control, and that it would cost more than I'd budgeted for, in ways I hadn't budgeted for at all. "Somewhere near the tollway," Renata finally spoke. "20 years I kept that ring polished, Walt." I didn't ask which ring. Then she said the thing that split the day in two. "I have to tell you something. Dion texted me 9 days ago. He said things were a mess down here. I didn't tell you because I didn't want you calling in like this." I sat with that for the length of 2 exit signs before I said anything back. Not anger. Something quieter and worse. The particular sting of learning your wife has been managing you, gently, for over a week, because she'd correctly predicted exactly how I'd react to bad news about our sons. She wasn't wrong to predict it. That's what stung. "What kind of mess?" I asked. "He didn't say. I should have pushed. I didn't want to know badly enough to risk you finding out too." That's twist number 2. My wife had a piece of the puzzle 9 days before I did, and she'd sat on it out of love for me, which is its own kind of quiet betrayal, the kind that doesn't announce itself as betrayal at all. I want you to hold on to how that made me feel, because it's the same feeling, diluted, but the same, that Marcus and Dion had been carrying about me for years without either of us saying it out loud. I love you, and I'm managing what you're allowed to know because I don't trust what you'll do with the whole truth. The flight home was 2 hours of silence. Somewhere over Missouri, something shifted in my chest, quiet, but permanent. I'd given them everything I never had, and somehow in giving it, I'd built a household where the only way anybody communicated difficult information was by hiding it from me first and hoping it resolved on its own. They wanted to be left alone. I decided somewhere over Missouri to actually test what that would cost them. I didn't yet know it would cost me something too. We got home a little after 10. The house had never been that quiet. Renata made it 2 steps past the front hall before her knees went. I got down on the floor with her and didn't try to fix anything, which is close to a miracle for a man who has spoken almost no other language his whole life. "Where did we go wrong?" I asked her, more to myself than to her. She lifted her head. "No, you didn't turn them into anything. They did that themselves." She paused, and here's where she gave me the piece I actually needed, the one that reframes everything before it. "But Walt, you also never once let them fail at anything small enough to survive. Every scraped knee, sure, but every real risk too. You cushioned every landing before they even knew they were falling. Maybe stay on your own isn't only cruelty. Maybe some part of it is a badly aimed, badly delivered request for the one thing you never gave them a chance to earn, the feeling of standing on their own 2 feet and finding out they could." I didn't like hearing that. I sat with it anyway because 29 years of marriage means you learn which of her sentences to argue with and which ones to simply let land. By sunrise, we were aligned on one thing. Whatever came next, we'd decide it together. I called our attorney, Russ Delgado, at 8 sharp. "I need my name off Marcus's lease guarantee today." Russ didn't move fast, and this is where the story gets more honest than the version you've probably heard before. "It's not instant, Walt. Guarantor withdrawal on a lease like that needs the property company's sign-off, and legally they can hold your name liable through the current term regardless, if they choose to enforce it that way. I can file the request today. Whether it actually releases you before the renewal window closes is up to their legal department, not us. How long? Could be 2 days. Could be 2 weeks. I've seen buildings sit on it out of pure administrative laziness." That uncertainty ate at me for 11 days. 11 days of not knowing whether my sons would face real consequences or whether the whole gesture would evaporate into paperwork nobody processed in time. I want you to sit in that uncertainty with me, because it's the truest part of this story. Nothing about consequences in real life arrives on cue. Twice during those 11 days, I nearly called Russ to withdraw the withdrawal. Twice, Renata talked me back off that ledge. Here's twist number 3, and it's the one that reframes the entire ending. While Russ's request sat in a property management queue in Austin, Marcus's actual business, a boutique fitness app startup he'd built with a college roommate, was already quietly failing, for reasons that had nothing to do with me. His business partner, a man named Colton who Marcus trusted enough to leave signing authority with, had been slowly draining the company's operating account for 4 months to cover his own gambling debt. Marcus had found out 3 weeks before the engagement party. He hadn't told anyone. Not Dion, not Presley, not us. The engagement party wasn't a celebration. It was cover. Marcus proposed to Presley 2 weeks earlier than he'd planned, threw the party a week after that, because he needed one enormous, undeniable piece of good news loud enough to drown out the sound of his company quietly dying underneath it. When we showed up on that doorstep asking about a lease renewal, we weren't intruding on a happy day. We were, without knowing it, standing at the exact seam where his carefully constructed image was already splitting open. That's why "stay on your own" came out of him with that much force. It wasn't really about us. It was about the one thing in his life he still had any control over, keeping his parents out of a mess he hadn't figured out how to survive yet. I found this out from Dion eventually, after everything else had already happened, and when I did, I sat with a version of guilt I hadn't budgeted for. Because here's the uncomfortable truth this story asked me to sit with: pulling that guarantee didn't cause Marcus's collapse. It arrived at almost the exact same time as a collapse that was already coming, for reasons entirely outside my knowledge or control, and it made it impossible for him to hide the wreckage from anyone a day longer. Was that justice, or was that just bad timing dressed up as consequences? I have turned that question over more nights than I'll admit on camera. I still don't have a clean answer. I only have what happened next. The lease renewal lapsed. Marcus and Presley got a non-compliance notice with a rent penalty attached, and 48 hours to either produce a new guarantor or vacate. There wasn't one. Marcus called me, voice tight. "Dad, there's a mistake with the lease." "There's no mistake, son. I withdrew as guarantor." Silence. Then something in his voice cracked open in a way I hadn't heard since he was small. "Dad, Colton's gone. He took almost everything from the business account. I haven't told anyone. I don't have anything left to qualify on my own. If this goes to an actual eviction filing, it's public record. My credit's finished. Presley and I won't be able to rent a closet in this city." And there it was. The whole truth finally, arriving too late to change anything I'd already set in motion, and too late for me to unknow what I'd learned about Presley's motives, or Dion's fear, or my own decades of never once letting either of my sons fall far enough to learn what falling teaches. "You told me to stay on my own," I said. "So I am." I hung up, and I want to tell you it felt like victory. It didn't. It felt like watching a house I'd built with my own hands catch fire from a source I hadn't lit, while holding the one bucket of water that might have helped, and choosing, deliberately with both hands, not to use it. They didn't wait for a formal eviction. Security watched them pack for 2 days rather than force them out, Marcus wheeling his own collapsed life out through the same lobby where, weeks earlier, his own fiancée had told his mother she was ruining a party. I didn't stop at the lease. I pulled the collateral behind Marcus's remaining business credit and informed Dion's lender in writing that I wouldn't cover future delinquencies on his truck loan. Neither bank moved instantly. One took 19 days to restructure the note. The other flagged the account but didn't freeze it for almost a month. Consequences, it turns out, are slower and messier than the version of revenge we tell ourselves we're owed. They came anyway. They just came on their own schedule, not mine. They showed up on our porch 3 weeks later in a rented box truck, 17 hours from Austin. Dion did the knocking. I let them in, sat them down in the same living room where Renata had collapsed weeks before. Marcus went first, and this time I want you to hear what he actually said, not just the shape of it. "How could you do this? We're your family. I'm getting married." And then, quieter, almost accidental, the truth slipping out sideways the way truths do when a person is too exhausted to keep managing them. "I didn't even have anything left before you pulled the guarantee, Dad. Colton took it. I just didn't want you to be the one who found out first." That single sentence rearranged the whole afternoon, because now I understood he hadn't been protecting his pride from me. He'd been protecting me from the failure, the same way his mother had protected me from a 9-day-old text message, the same way I had spent 26 years protecting them from ever having to fail at anything on their own. We were, all four of us, running the exact same defective program. Love means managing what the people you love are allowed to know. You're just a control freak who wants us to fail, Marcus said next, and I watched him reach for the old script because the new honest sentence had cost him more than he had left to spend. I didn't flinch. I don't want you to fail, son. But you told me you didn't need me hovering. If you truly don't need me, you don't need my name on your lease, my collateral on your business, or my signature on your debt. That's not revenge. That's adulthood, arriving later than it should have because I never once let it arrive on time. Renata stepped in from the kitchen. Your father and I are aligned. We're honoring what you asked for. And here's twist number 4, the last one, and the one that actually decides how this story ends. Dion, who had said almost nothing since walking in, finally spoke, and he didn't speak to us. He turned to his brother. Tell them the rest, Marcus. Tell them what you told me about Colton back in April. Tell them why you really proposed early. His voice was shaking, but it didn't break. I'm done covering for you so you look like the one who's got it together. I've been doing that since we were kids. The room went silent in a way that had nothing to do with us at all. Two brothers, finally having the conversation they should have had months earlier, in front of the two people they'd spent weeks blaming for a collapse that had started somewhere else entirely. Marcus didn't answer him. He stood, said nothing further, and walked out to the truck. Dion stayed another 20 minutes. He didn't apologize outright. He wasn't ready for that yet. But he said one true thing before he left. I should have told you about the text. I should have told you a lot of things. I was more scared of him than I was honest with you. Then he left too. I didn't call after either of them. I'd spent 26 years being the man who chased down every loose thread before it could hurt his sons. That night, for the first time, I let two grown men carry their own unfinished conversation out my front door without me fixing it for them. I went to see Russ the following week, not about a lease. I want to rewrite the trust. How completely? I told him everything. Renata first, then me, then if we're both gone, scholarships for the children of merchant mariners lost at sea, the way my own father was. Not 0 for spite. 0 because the boys had made it clear, in their own words, that they didn't need what I could give them, and because for the first time I actually believed I owed it to somebody to test that claim, rather than simply absorb it the way I'd absorbed every hard thing they'd ever said to me. Russ didn't ask me to reconsider. He made the note. Months passed. Marcus and Dion stopped speaking to each other for a while, then started again, carefully, the way people rebuild something that used to hold weight and might not anymore. I heard, through Dion, that Marcus eventually reported Colton to the authorities and is rebuilding something smaller, slower, entirely his own. I heard Dion moved into his own place, a small one, nothing worth photographing, and that he called his mother, not me, once a month to talk about nothing in particular. That's new. That's his. I won't pretend it doesn't sting, watching that door open a crack wider for her than it does for me. Some nights it still does, but every time that ache creeps in, I remember the hallway, and the ring that never got its moment, and something else now too, the version of Dion sobbing in a gas station parking lot, more afraid of his own brother than of losing his father. I remember that not everyone in that hallway was cruel in the same way, or for the same reasons, and that understanding why someone hurt you doesn't obligate you to hand them anything back before they've earned it. It just means you stop being surprised by people and start being honest with yourself about the part you played in building the room they broke in. Renata and I sit on the back porch most evenings, coffee in hand, watching the sky do its slow fade over the yard where two boys once learned to ride bikes. I stayed up half the night assembling. She put her hand on mine one evening, the way she's done 1,000 times across 29 years, and I understood something simple and considerably less comfortable than the version of it I believed the day I flew to Austin. My father died when I was 9, and I spent my life trying to become the man he never got the chance to be. Somewhere in that effort, I built 2 sons who learned to hide the truth from me long before they ever learned to stand in front of me and say it plainly. because I taught them, one rescued crisis at a time, that the truth wasn't safe to bring home. My sons have their own lives now. They're finally, slowly learning to tell each other the truth, which is more than either of them was doing the day I stood in that doorway. My wife and I have each other, and something else now too. The beginning of an honest accounting of what 26 years of fixing everything actually cost the people I was fixing it for. It turns out that's not the tidy ending I thought I wanted. It's a truer one. And most nights on this porch, that's enough. That's